So the BC government is banning Airbnb. Okay, not really, but pretty darn close. The BC government has decided to drastically restrict Airbnb and VRBO style short-term rental properties. Now, the theory behind this is that it will open up more long-term rental opportunities for residents in BC. So let's unpack all of this and get into the nitty-gritty. Welcome to Live, Love, Kelowna. All right, so a couple of days ago, Premier David Eby announced sweeping changes to the rules around short-term rentals typically provided through companies like Airbnb, VRBO, and Expedia. They will also apply to people posting on private sites like Facebook Marketplace, Kijiji, Craigslist, as well as classified ads in newspapers. Now, that was taken right from the BC government website, and yes, it did say newspapers and also referenced Craigslist. Now, these changes will not apply to reserve lands, hotels, motels, as well as any treaty lands or treaty First Nation unless the nation decides to opt in to all or part of the legislation. Now, that last part will be interesting to see. I mean, if I were a betting man, I would probably put my money on them deciding not to opt into the legislation. So how long will this legislation take effect? This is right from the BC government website. There are parts to this new legislation that will take place immediately, like the ability of regional districts to issue business licenses and increase maximum penalties. Other changes, like the province's principal residence requirement and registration system, will come later. So here's what will take place immediately. Number one, the maximum fine will increase from $2,000 to $50,000. Number two, in areas where a business license is required, short-term rental hosts will be required to display a valid license number on their listing. Number three, platform accountability. If a listing does not include a valid business license where a business license is required by the local government, the short-term rental platform must remove the listing at the request of the local government. Number four, under the new rules, short-term rental platforms will be required to share information about short-term listings with the province, and the province can then share this information with local governments. The province has said they will keep the short-term rental information confidential and will not disclose it to the public. All right, here is what will likely take place in the new year. Short-term rentals will be restricted to the host's principal residence as well as to any secondary suite at the residence. This will apply province-wide with municipalities with a population of 10,000 or more, and the province will establish a short-term rental registry. This will help to ensure that short-term rental hosts and platforms are following the rules and provide local governments and province the information needed to follow up when they don't. In order to ensure the rules are being followed, the province will establish a provincial compliance and enforcement unit. All right, so the timelines the government is putting in place are as follows. Immediately after the proposed bill receives royal assent, the increased fines and tickets for and business licensing authority for regional districts will take effect. May 1st, 2024, the principal residence requirement, including the definition of exempt areas or accommodations and changes to legal non-conforming use protections. Summer of 2024, the data sharing will take effect. And then later next year, the provincial registry launch will happen, requiring platforms to remove listings without valid provincial registry numbers. Now, recently in a statement, Airbnb said the legislation will not alleviate the housing crisis, but instead will take money out of people's pockets, inflate the cost of accommodations for visitors, and decrease tourism revenue. Quote, "We hope the BC government will pursue more sensible regulation and listen to the many residents, hosts, travelers, and businesses that will be impacted by the proposed rules." Okay, so let's talk about this and what kind of an effect it's going to have on the market, specifically here in the Okanagan. Now, according to AirDNA, a platform that tracks short-term rental statistics, there are approximately 1,727 local STR listings in Kelowna and the surrounding areas, including Lake Country and West Kelowna. Now, the vast majority, approximately 1,599 of these listings, are of the entire home and not just one room in the home. Now, this data is just restricted to Airbnb and VRBO, the two major platforms in the area when it comes to short-term rentals. This does not include those that are running their own STRs on sites like Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji. Now, I'm sure the number of actual units is probably closer to 2,000 if you factor in all of the platforms and private listings. So think about the Okanagan in the summer. Our population here almost doubles during July and August, and the short-term rental market is going to dry up by May of 2024. This will put a ton of pressure on the hotels and motels in the area that are already booked up through the summer months. So when supply is restricted, what happens to pricing? It will increase, and likely to a level that will price individuals and families out of the market. I mean, it's already expensive to visit here. Gas is high, price of groceries are higher than they ever have been before, and now our tourism industry is going to be hit hard because of the restrictions being put into place. My estimation is that well over half of these units will be gone from the short-term rental pool, which will drive the cost of hotel and motel rates through the roof. The lack of supply and the same demand as previous years, and this will absolutely become a reality. Now, this will have an effect on every business in the central Okanagan that relies on tourism to pay their bills and to turn a profit. Okay, so now let's look at this from the government side. They want to open up long-term rental options for people, which incidentally, I don't disagree with. In order for these Airbnb operators to shift to a long-term rental model, they're going to have to change rents that cover the cost of their mortgage, utilities, taxes, and provide some sort of cash flow or profit margin. According to rentfaster.ca, the average rent for a single family home in Kelowna right now is just under $3,700. Now, I would expect rents to come down just a little bit as more inventory hits the market, but look for rents to likely increase as a result of owners and landlords that will look to cover the cost of keeping a single family home in the central Okanagan. Now, the vacancy rate in Kelowna, according to CMHC, is sitting at 1.2%. The increase of rental units by restricting Airbnb and forcing these rental units into the pool will have a negligible effect on the vacancy rate here. Even if all 1,727 units come into the rental pool, which is highly unlikely, the vacancy rate likely wouldn't even touch 2%. I mean, realistically, out of those 1,700 units, we will probably see some of these homes being listed for sale, as they won't be able to stay net positive without the Airbnb model. Now, if that happens, there would be even less inventory going into the rental pool. So one would have to wonder why the province is moving so forward with such a punitive plan. Now, according to the government, they think that this new legislation will bring about 16,000 new rental units into the pool, and they hope that it alleviates the pressure on the housing crisis. Now, based on the Okanagan model, I don't see this as happening. I think it looks good as a white paper and would certainly be a good discussion for experts and pundits alike. Now, time will tell if the theory works to alleviate some of the stress. In the meantime, there will be a lot of people and businesses affected by this legislation. Now, one of the big unknowns right now, after having a quick chat with the city planning department, is how developments like Playa del Sol will be affected. Will the city be allowed to apply for an exemption for these kinds of properties because of how they've been approved by City of Kelowna bylaws? Also, an unknown is how exemptions will play out. What if a city already has a healthy vacancy rate? Take West Kelowna as an example. Their vacancy rate is about 3%. Could they, or better yet, should they be exempt from these rules as a city with a population over 10,000? In my very strong opinion, I feel like the legislation seems a little bit rushed and really not that well thought out. I feel that it's quite punitive and it's not really going to have the desired effect that the government is hoping for. So what do you think about the legislation? I'm interested to hear your comments below. All right, as always, if you're thinking about making a move into or out of Kelowna, then we should talk. You can reach me on my cell at 403-827-7527, or you can always shoot me an email to info@livelovekelowna.ca. All right, we'll see you on the next video.